Howdy, folks. Welcome to the inaugural episode of the Suhu podcast entitled Farm to Formula. Today, we're talking about something that rarely gets enough attention in skincare, which is where ingredients actually come from. Not the marketing story or what's written on the bottle, but the literal journey from some farm somewhere to the formula to your medicine cabinet at home. A lot of conversations around skincare seem to be focused on the results that you're feeling once your product is on your skin. But we're going to rewind that tape and talk about what a product is before it even touches your skin. And by we, I'm referring to Lydia, our founder, who has a PhD in chemistry and keeps us honest when it comes to what ingredients actually do and why they work. So Lydia, do you want to tell a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that intro, Yorick. My name's Lydia, and yeah, the key thing, I guess, to know about my background is I come from a research background in proteomics, which is really looking at how molecules connect to and impact proteins in your body. And really, when I transitioned from like drug discovery to skincare, I was super interested in understanding how the molecules in your skincare products affect change in your body as well. And a lot of that process really depends on what the molecular profile of your skincare product is. And we're going to talk about that today in our podcast.
Yay, I'm so excited.
Yay!
If we're talking about rewinding the tape and getting to the beginning of a product's life, then the first step is ingredient sourcing. And when people are talking about ingredient sourcing, I think a lot of us are thinking, ethical, sustainable. These are nice values to have, but it actually is a bit deeper than that. The reality is that sourcing is not just this moral decision, but actually does affect the performance of what you're putting on your body. Because every ingredient starts as something grown in the soil. That means that farming practices like climate, harvest timing, and processing are all shaping what's being put on your skin. And if those systems are messed up, then the ingredients compromise before it even reaches a lab, and that's before it even gets to your house. And then from an environmental perspective, sourcing is also determining whether land is being regenerated or depleted, and whether water systems are protected or polluted. And ultimately, and I think most importantly, whether communities can continue to grow these ingredients long term. I think that's an aspect of sustainability that's often overlooked. We're not just here to talk about the environment, but we're also talking about these communities and how they can grow going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we think about the chemistry side of this, right, you mentioned like how do we keep the ingredients intact over time? And so that's both thinking about what the environment looks like now and then also what it looks like in the future. And the way we think about that on the chemistry side is we look at the molecular profile of the plant. And so I really want to stress that when we're thinking about something like an essential oil, like I'm just gonna show you like this sea fennel essential oil, right? This essential oil is comprised of many compounds that are all within the sea fennel plant. And all of those compounds make up the molecular profile. Basically, what is a snapshot in time picture of all the different chemicals in this sea fennel right now? And what York is getting at is like that changes within context of the environment. And so a really easy way to think about that is actually to just take it back to something super simple. Like think about how leaf colors change from spring to summer to fall to winter. The leaves are green. That's because the profile of the plant at that time has a lot of chlorophyll, and chlorophyll is green. And then as the weather gets colder, the plant needs to conserve energy, and so it pulls back its production of chlorophyll, and you see the loss of green in the leaves. You see them turn to red and eventually fall off. And so that, you can imagine those snapshots in time throughout the year, the molecular profile of the leaf looks different over time. And that's something that's cyclical, but you can also think of sustainability in terms of like from 5 years ago to 10 years in the future. So if you're growing a specific crop in a specific area and it goes through some kind of climate change or other stress on the land, the plants that grow there are going to have a different molecular profile 5 years ago than they will in 10 years. And so when we're really thinking about this in terms of like the products that we're buying, right? It goes kind of back to like, where are the original ingredients coming from? And it's not always easy to get that information, even as someone who is formulating the products, right? Like, we can go and ask for the country of origin, but it's actually really awesome if you can get back even further than that to like, where in the country is the actual crop. And some companies will be able to give you that information, right? And so the more information you can have, the better you can start to build that molecular profile, even without doing an analysis in the lab, right? Like, I can say that based on the knowledge around the environment and the health of the soil in this country at this time, that we probably have relatively healthy plants growing versus in a climate that's been under a lot of stress for a long time. So that's like one way to start looking at it, is to kind of go back to the literal physical location of the land that the plants are grown on. And just to give you like a little picture of this, one of the common ingredients that you find a lot of times in like aromatherapy and things like that is lavender. Lavender is a really beautiful plant. The cooling properties come from a few molecules found in the plant, specifically linolyl acetate. And you can actually go and you can analyze lavender from different places in the world, and you can see different percentages ranging from like very low to very high of linolyl acetate. And so you can imagine then, if you're getting lavender from one of those fields, your product at the end is going to have a more significant aromatherapeutic effect than lavender from another field. And so, yeah, that's kind of covering just a little bit about molecular profile and location.
That's so
And
cool
then,
that you can use geography to get some kind of deduction around the molecular structure of a plant. That's really interesting.
yeah, totally, exactly. And you can, I mean, you can apply this to everything, right? And even like when you think about tea, like the tea that's in my mug is a blend of tea from one specific company that I like a lot, and they talk a lot about the origin of their ingredients. And so you're like, okay, well, that's some information for me that builds a little bit more trust than if I go online and I buy tea and there's no information about the origin, right? We just don't know that much information. And like, as a chemist, right, like in my own home, I can't go and test these things and prove, right, what's in them. I could send them to a
Yeah,
lab and spend money, but like, we have to use kind of the tools that we have access to, right?
totally. Yeah, it's really cool to me that ethical sourcing isn't something that just exists on the human side or the environmental side, but it's also something that's directly affecting the molecular structure of your skincare.
Yeah, totally. It's really cool.
So we have this ingredient, maybe it's lavender, maybe it's tea, maybe it's whatever. We know geographically where it's come from. The next question in my mind is, how did I take this plant out of the ground and turn it into something that can be used in a skincare product? And so, I mean, I'm familiar with terms like cold pressed, first pressed, unrefined. They show up all over skincare. It can sound like a lot of a noise, but from a sustainability lens, those terms actually do matter quite a bit. Cold pressing is a processing form that uses mechanical force over a chemical solvent, which automatically is going to mean less energy, less chemical waste, and fewer downstream environmental impacts. You can get more out of, like, say, lavender with a solvent extraction that might produce higher yields, but it's also going to result in chemical residues, which create waste. And that's really hard to manage responsibly. So when we choose cold pressed oils, we're not just thinking about how these products are going to feel on your skin. We're also thinking about the energy use. I gotta hold my fingers up or you can't see them. Waste reduction and environmental cost.
Totally. And yeah, it's super interesting. Like I like the idea of this like molecular profile, right? Because it's almost like you're taking the plant and you're carrying the plant through this processing to the final product. And like you said, like along the way, what you're essentially doing is you're applying these different processes to it to get it into a format that you can actually use in a skincare product or in some cases food, right? And at each layer of processing, you're introducing potential contaminant. Like you said, the solvents can contaminate. You're also introducing loss of the original material, right? And then you're also generating waste. And so each of these things kind of have this like give and take to this process. And what you end up getting is you take this molecular profile that's complex at the beginning, and you get a slightly less complex molecular profile at the end. And what you're really hoping to do as the person taking it through this process is you're trying to make sure that you have integrity with the ingredients at the end that actually cause some sort of functional change to the health of your skin. And so if you lose some along the way, that's okay, but you want to be able to keep, like in the lavender case, the ingredient that causes the actual functional cooling effect and aromatherapy effect. And so in general, like the way I like to think about this is to help like decrease the buzzwords and just sort of like increase understanding of what's really happening is like the more raw something is, the closer it is to the original plant. And then the more refined it is, the further away from the original plant it is. And along that process, you can imagine that this broad molecular profile of all these compounds gets narrower and narrower and narrower. And so you talked about a couple forms of processing to basically be able to take the plant and turn it into the oil. And one of that is cold pressing, which you said was like mechanical pressing. There's no heat involved. So this is like a really solid way to basically extract out a pretty complex profile of the original plant. And this is often used in producing like olive oil, avocado oil, like a lot of these oils that you hear about. One that we use a lot in our products is rosehip seed oil, and this is cold pressed, and you know it's cold pressed because you can go online and when you're buying this, or even sometimes on the label itself, like this not only says where the origin is, but it also has the cold pressed and winterized information in here too. So if you're buying something, you should be able to figure out what the manufacturing process was. There's other processing techniques though too. I'm going to skip over solvents and get back to that, but there's
Sure.
there's steam distillation, which is a process that involves, like, imagine you're steaming like broccoli on the stove. It's kind of similar. It's just you're using very high pressurized steam to essentially break open like the oil pockets in the plant, and then the oil gets vaporized into another part of the machinery, and then essentially you can separate the oil from the steam. And the oil in that case, also you're still keeping a large portion of the molecular profile, but the oil has been heated. So the difference between the cold press and the steam is that you're applying some heat. And so some of the molecules that are a little bit more sensitive to heat are going to be degraded partially or lost in some cases. So if you're looking at steam distillation, it's a really classic technique. Don't be afraid of it, but there is some loss of these more complex molecules. And then another one that is really cool is called CO2 extraction. And interestingly enough, if you think about like vanilla, right? Like a lot of things online, like a lot of things online, if they say vanilla, you have to dig in a little deeper because vanilla is one of those like scents that's often duped, and they will use, instead of the vanilla plant, they'll use like a mimic of the smell, but it's
Like
actually
the beaver gland, right?
Yeah, there's like a lot of interesting ones. And like maybe for your purposes, that's not a big deal. But if you're looking for the profile of vanilla, you can't use a dupe. And so vanilla, often, if you want to know if it's been extracted properly, you're going to look for something called CO2 extraction, which all that means is that you're actually, instead of pressurizing steam through the plant, you're using a process that involves carbon dioxide. And this is generally a more quote unquote green process because there's not the water waste involved. And you could potentially use, like CO2 that's been captured from like another process to do it. So that's pretty cool. And now I'm going to get to the solvent one because this lets me touch on a specific area that is interesting to me. Like just in general, like the word chemical, right? Everything is made out of chemicals,
Oh
right?
yeah.
And so one thing that's interesting to think about, like from solvent extraction, is often solvents are associated with like chemicals that are more damaging to the environment, which is typically true. But you can also think of a solvent extraction as just the tea that you make, right? Like I have
Oh
my pot
yeah.
of tea here. And the solvent in this case is just the water. And I put hot water into my tea, and it is literally extracting the compounds from the tea out into the water. And now I can drink the tea. So
A
that's a
very scary
super
solvent, dihydrogen oxide or dioxide. Is that right?
exactly. Yeah, our H2O.
Scary
Exactly.
stuff.
So scary. But you can think, right, like if you're using this much water to extract this much tea, if you're doing this on a massive scale, like it certainly does contribute to water waste, right? And then there's the flip side, which is you can use other solvents too, like ethanol and hexane and things like that. And those are much more waste wise damaging to the environment. And they're used for things that are difficult to extract. There are plants where certain compounds don't come out in water, they don't really come out in steam distillation. So they use a solvent. But you do want to be more careful with those because if it's not done properly, you may have residual like hexane, residual ethanol, residual components of that process in your final product. And that's generally less healthy for your skin. We're not so afraid of water, right? But like
Yeah, that makes
other
sense.
things are not great. So yeah, that kind of covers that. And I guess like um, one of the things that I just wanted to point out is like if you are going to buy essential oils, right? Like essential oils are faked all the time. And I want to bring it back to that whole molecular profile thing, which is like if you're buying an essential oil that's really from the plant and it's shown that it is in fact that plant, right? Like they have the scientific name, they tell you how they extract it. You're getting a specific profile of compounds, and that's what lends to the therapeutic effect. And I'm going to give the example of sandalwood because sandalwood is a very expensive essential oil when it's not fake. And so, like, there's a couple different types of sandalwood. One of the ones that you see a lot is Indian sandalwood or Australian sandalwood. And both of them have similar but not the same molecular profiles. They're both authentic, they're not fake, but they're a little different. And so Indian sandalwood is a little bit more known for like anti-inflammatory properties, and then Australian sandalwood is a little bit more known for like anti-acne microbial properties. Indian sandalwood is harvested it was over harvested. The environment was highly damaged. It's much more rare and hard to get. Australian sandalwood is a lot more friendly for the environment in the way that it currently is being produced, and it's more common to find typically because of that. But they're both real essential oils. You'll get the molecular profile of the plant. But if you go online and you look for sandalwood essential oil, a lot of times you'll find dupes, which are basically mixtures of chemicals that smell like sandalwood, but they don't actually contain the right molecular profile, and they may not even be from the plant. It could be called just like fragrance, and in that case, the scent molecules were made probably in a lab, or they were extracted from a different plant, or they were adulterated in some way to give the scent, but not the functional property. And so you just want to be careful about that. So avoid things in general that you don't see the origin, that you can't see the manufacturing process. And also if they say fragrance on them or they say perfume grade, often is
Natural
goes
flavors.
for, yeah, natural flavors. These things just, they mean that you're not actually getting that beautiful breath of all those molecules. So that's
Totally.
kind of
Yeah.
my my take on that.
Yeah. What I'm hearing you say is the function of these chemicals or these things that we're processing follows the form of that molecular structure. And so the sourcing matters. And then on top of that, the way that you're processing it really matters too, because that's going to affect that molecular structure. And it's really cool because you have this synchronicity where caring about that processing and caring about that sourcing is also really great for the environment, great for the product that you're putting on your face. So that's really cool. So we've sourced our ingredients from an ethical place. We're using sustainable processing procedures. The next question is scale. One of the trade-offs of industrial scale is uniformity. So when I'm making just a huge amount of product in a manufacturing capacity, it's really nice when things just look the same way every single time. It really improves efficiency for that manufacturing process. But unfortunately, that's not how nature works. Nature does not always love conformity like that. Over refining the ingredients strips out variability, and it also strips out nutrients, going back to that molecular form that we were talking about earlier. From an environmental standpoint, that means more processing, more energy, and more waste. And then from a skin health standpoint, it often means ingredients that are just weaker. At Suhu, we accept that natural ingredients just vary slightly, and we see it as a feature instead of a bug. It means that the ingredient is closer to its original state and more biologically meaningful. We've farmed it ethically, sourced it sustainably. Now we need to talk about the manufacturing. So from an environmental perspective, small batch and made to order production reduces waste. Products aren't sitting on the shelves oxidizing, the ingredients are fresher, there's less overproduction and less disposal. I mean, that's just common sense. If I make a billion vitamin C serums at Suhu, we're not going to be able to sell a billion vitamin C serums in 6 months. So then what happens to all that product? Fortunately for us, we use bottles that are really great at reducing oxidizing. So maybe there would be a little less waste there. But ultimately, yeah, if we're overproducing, then we are just creating waste. These small batches also force us to be really intentional because every product exists because someone chose it, not because we just needed more inventory. It's not the fastest way to create product or to grow a skincare brand, but it is definitely the most responsible one. So I'm really proud that we're a small batch made to order company.
Yeah, totally. And when I was thinking about this earlier, one thing that came to my mind is like the idea of buying a like TV dinner or like frozen dinner versus like buying a meal at a nice restaurant.
I love that
And
analogy.
yeah, I like it too because it's very similar, right? It's like really when you're thinking about something like food, the things that we care about, right? Is like, okay, where is the food grown? How long did it take to get to my table? What did the people do to it? Like, how processed was it? How healthy is it? And the more you know about that, the more you know you can take care of your body through the food that you eat. And it's funny because I think skincare, because so many things in skincare are like so trending and so beautiful and so, like there's so many eye-catching things, right? And like I think when you actually really break it down, the thing you want to remember is your skin is it is your biggest organ, right? It's this like huge organ that's protecting your body, keeping everything together, and it's also the one thing that gets exposed to so many external environmental factors, whether that's sun or pollution or, just like the day-to-day wear and tear of age. And yeah, when you're thinking about taking care of the biggest organ in your body, you kind of want to know that your food for your skin, so to speak, was prepared in a healthy way, and also in a way that wasn't just like over processed, like thrown in a freezer at the grocery store. So the nice thing about small batches, right, is you already kind of covered this, York, but like the ingredients are not going to be sitting on a shelf for a year or years before they are used and purchased. The ingredients are bought in smaller batches, and then the actual batches themselves are made when we need to make them. So like as orders are coming in, and so that ensures a lot of freshness of the ingredient. And then on top of that, like also ensures more complexity to these ingredients. Like we said, some companies do just say, okay, we're going to include the one active ingredient. I'm going to make a serum that's basically like a moisturizer. We've, made all the ingredients in a lab, which is fine. I'm not saying you can't use lab-made ingredients. Those are super useful. But like, if you're looking for the complexity of the plant, right, then you want to have the full plant oil included. You also want to know that whatever active ingredients aren't degrading, and you want to know your end product hasn't been on the shelf potentially degrading for months or years, right? So all those things kind of come together where making smaller batches just is like a nicer result for the consumer, honestly.
Totally. And in these early days of Suhu, that means that you are guaranteed to have a PhD chemist personally manufacturing each individual product that you're purchasing, which is pretty cool. I don't know that a lot of people can say that.
Yeah, that's true. I do a lot of our manufacturing. I oversee all of our quality control. Yeah, it's actually really nice. And to be honest, like I think there are a lot of just like white label skincare companies out there that like go to a big manufacturer and they're like, hey, I want to make this formula, and they just do it for them. And that's great. But I really wanted our hands to be like involved in the process, especially early on, to like really create, these luxury products that I use every day myself. Yeah, like really just wanting to be involved in that process and to know that all of our ingredients are also coming from similar like-minded people who want to be involved in the process of creation, right?
Totally. It's a community process. You can't be sustainable or ethical as an individual. It's about building that community from the ground up, which is really cool. I'm excited to be a part of that. All right. So far we've talked about how producers can farm ethically, process sustainably, and manufacture reasonably. That's taking care of the things on our side. But what about the things on you, the viewer side, the consumer, which is also myself and Lydia? But how does a consumer make more sustainable choices? So my advice is really simple. I think the answer to this question is to just ask more questions. Where was this ingredient grown? How was it extracted? Can this brand explain their sourcing without hiding behind buzzwords? If you can think of more questions, let me know in the comment section down below. But like, the more inquisitive you are as a consumer, ultimately, the more sustainable your choices will be.
Yeah, no, totally. And I think simplicity here is kind of key, right? Like there's so many products on the market and there are so many beautiful brands that do things really well. And then there are also brands that, maybe it's not their priority for some of these things. And you as the consumer really just need to make a choice of like, where do you want to kind of fall on that? And like all of us can only just do our best, right? Like there are certain things where, depending on like what is available to us, like we just don't really have that much of a choice, right? But I think where you can have the impact and feel good about yourself is like in those moments where you do have the means to make a choice or you do have the option to be curious and be like, okay, well, what is it then that I really want out of my skincare? Like, what is it that I really want out of my food or, whatever choice you're asking yourself. And I think there's so much information now available, like through AI and online, like doing research is just getting easier and easier and easier. And so that's like really empowering in a lot of ways. And so I think finding like local, smaller brands that do these things is just going to get easier and easier for the
Totally.
consumer. And I think, yeah, the main thing is like just be conscious of in the moments where you want to make a choice to give yourself the space to do a little bit of that research and be curious. And yeah, I think a lot of like smaller brands really want to also be improving, right? And so I think if you are shopping from somewhere and they're like, oh, I didn't know about this, right? Like, I think that's okay too, right? Like they have the opportunity in that moment to learn and do better, right? So I think the way that we approach this from the community level is like we're all working together to create an environment where brands are more sustainable and healthier, and then consumers are more informed and able to make better choices. And yeah, my key takeaway as a chemist here is just I I think there's so much like buzzword online around like chemical and what's healthy and not healthy, and like the key thing here is not all chemicals are bad, right? Everything's made out of chemicals, but understanding where the ingredients came from, understanding how they were processed, and how they ended up in your product is the way that you can get at the health of the products that you're buying. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Skincare isn't starting with that product on the grocery shelf or when you're at home putting that moisturizer on your face. It's starting months back, miles away in some field somewhere where those ingredients are really getting their start. Yeah, and I think I've touched on this a bit already, but I just want to say again, like it's super cool that when we're looking at sourcing, the chemistry and the ethics, they're in line with one another. Products are working better and the systems behind them are healthier when we're thinking about these sourcing decisions a bit deeper. But yeah, if you want to go deeper, viewer, into this discussion, please feel free to check out our blog post breaking this down. We're going to put the link down in the description below. And if you have any questions, we really encourage you to leave them in the comments. These conversations matter. They're important to us. And we're really super excited to engage with you. So thanks for being here. Thanks, Lydia, for joining us. And we'll see you in the next one.
Bye.
Bye.